1980s, within the Sichuan province of China, archaeologists uncovered a treasure trove of artifacts that belonged to a mysterious culture that seemed to inhabit the area around 3,000 years ago. Masterfully worked relics made from gold and elephant tusks were only the beginning of the discoveries surrounding the site known as Sanxingdui. In the years of excavations that followed, more artifacts, large buildings, and even parts of city walls were uncovered, and yet, historians were puzzled as to what culture had left all these magnificent artifacts behind. A number of perfectly preserved masks were recovered at the site, which had highly exaggerated features, including large, distorted eyes and wide, flattened ears. Scientists, to this day, are still trying to uncover who left these artifacts behind, as there is almost no record of this civilization in recorded Chinese history. Perhaps clues may be locked away in some of the magnificent structures left behind by the powerful emperors of the ancient past. This case file join the theorists as they crack open some cold ones and stack up their pyramids and explore the legends around the Chinese pyramids.
Welcome to Alien Theorists Theorizing Case File 225, the fucking goddamn China pyramids. I'm Braden.
I'm Zell.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Andrew.
The fucking Chinese pyramids.
The monthly Ron Pond fan pick. This one, I think this was a clear front runner.
Yeah, I think they got it right this time.
I think so.
I do.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how it's received. And then we decide if they got it right.
And if it sucks, it's your fault.
It's your fault. Yeah.
It's your fucking fault.
Always.
Right on yourself. Do better.
Ain't nothing we can do. I mean, I just put the choices up there. That's it.
Put them up.
It's always fascinating when any of this stuff pops up in new pyramids. Like, it's weird to think that when I was, even in my early teens, you said pyramids, I went, Egypt, that's it.
Yep. That's all you thought. At least that's all you thought about then.
Yeah. And, like now that you're older, you're like, where the fuck doesn't have a pyramid?
I feel like it's easier to find places, or it's harder to find places that don't have pyramids now, right?
Right. Some sort of pyramid structure. I mean, even in North America, we have indigenous pyramid structures, the famous Bosnian pyramid, the granddaddy.
I just was reading something today that some guy claims that Canada has Chinese pyramids.
I seen that headline, but I didn't go down that hole.
I went too deep.
Yeah,
went too deep.
Probably Trudeau sold them to China. Classic. Right?
Well, it's the only thing
they've been here all along.
the only thing left is all we have is fucking Chinese pyramid schemes, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, you always think about the pyramids of Egypt, but as you get more and more into it, pyramids on every continent. Maybe not all megalithic, built pyramids, but pyramid structures.
And China's an interesting one because it's such not a lot of information leaves China. We don't know a lot about their inner workings and stuff like that because it's a communist country. They keep that stuff pretty tight to their chest.
A little more controlled.
Little more controlled of what gets out to everyone. So it's kind of fascinating to think that they have all these pyramid structures, and there's not a lot that we really know about them here in the West.
It's crazy because they have to be looking into it themselves. They have to have their own archaeologists, working on this stuff regularly. And the fact that they're able to keep it that airtight is wild to me.
Well, they did open the one up, and that's where they found the or one of the structures near one of the pyramids. That's where they found the terracotta army, right?
I mean, they have excavated certain parts of, like we talked about it before, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the original, the first emperor of
the Terracotta
China.
Armada?
Yes.
That's the one.
Yeah, okay.
That's one of it. And there are other tombs that have similar, terracotta armies. That's not the only one. There are other structures,
pyramid. So it's like, so when we talk about kind of Chinese pyramids, or when people refer to the Chinese pyramids, what they're really referring to is the kind of like the mausoleum structures that are built by mostly, I think you'll find them normally about there's Qin Shi Huang, which is the most famous one and the biggest one. And then you have other ones in the following the dynasty, the Han dynasty, which followed his, and that would be like their mausoleums as well. And then I think there's probably a couple in the Tang dynasty as well. So those are the kinds of ones we were talking about. But I always remember hearing about the Chinese pyramids when it always pops up on everybody's favorite Ancient Aliens. Like I always remember hearing about it, and I'm like, oh, that sounds really cool. Like, I wish they would go more into this. It's always like, it always seems like they mention it just like in a passing, and always kind of like always kind of grated on me that I'm like, oh, well, like that sounds really interesting. Why don't you talk more about it? And then it would always be like, you get like maybe like a 2-minute
dragons from the sky come down. Could these dragons have been interstellar beings from another world?
Jesse Ventura narrating it.
Yeah. But so the sighting of the first pyramids kind of goes back a while. So you have the first real kind of report of these pyramids, an actual pyramid, is you got one report from 1945 where you had a U.S. Air Force pilot named James Gaussman who was flying a leg of his journey between India and China.
Yeah. So did you I don't know if you remember hearing about this, but I think I learned about it in grade 11. But so the route he was taking was called the Burma Hump. Have you ever heard of the Burma Hump?
It sounds familiar, but
yeah. So basically, it's got its nickname. The Allied pilots gave it that name. It was an airlift operation that crossed the Himalayan foothills into China, and apparently, it was the Army Air Force's most dangerous airlift route. It was the only way that they could supply the Chinese forces that were fighting Japan at the time. Obviously, it wasn't going well for China, so they had to. But apparently this route, just like fucking crazy weather that would just come out of the blue, out of nowhere.
Well, you're going over the Himalayas, so like just turbulent air.
Well, and the terrain too, right? The route you had to fly right through the Kali Gandaki River Gorge, which is like a depression much wider and deeper than Grand Canyon. And like the mountains that surround this gorge are 10,000 feet higher than most planes could fly.
1 second. Are you telling me there's a grander canyon?
Apparently,
the Grand Canyon's not so grand now, is it?
Oh yeah, what the hell is this bullshit? That's some American propaganda right there.
Absolutely, but it's pretty wild though. So he's going through this pretty treacherous route. And like the only reason we're even talking about this story is because like he's going through this route and he starts having engine trouble. So he has to lower the altitude of his plane. And when he does so,
he spots this what he said was a tremendous looking pyramid. And he's quoted as saying it was pure white on all sides. So, I mean, this is, it recalls imagery of like the pyramids in their orial forms, which we always see.
It gives me Jumanji vibes.
Yeah.
He's like fucking flying out of the mist, drops down. There's all of a sudden a pyramid with the Jumanji jewel on top.
So then, further on, he elaborates that there's this remarkable thing was that there was a capstone on the top of this pyramid, a huge piece of jewel-like material that could have been crystal. And he says there was Sauron. Yeah, and as interesting as it was, and fascinating as this out of place it seemed, he said there was no way they could have landed there, although they really wanted to. But they were just struck dumb by the absolute immensity of this thing.
Well, this thing's bigger than the Great Pyramids of Egypt, like much bigger.
What he describes it as.
Yeah.
So then about 2 years later, after Gaussman's sighting in 1947, you would have U.S. Air Force Colonel Maurice Sheehan, who was flying over a valley near the Qinling Mountains, when he also saw whether another giant pyramid, whether it's the same one or a different one. It's not exactly clear, but he definitely said that he sighted a pyramid structure. And this one was actually became widely circulated because it was reported in the March 28th edition of the New York Times under the awesome headline of U.S. flyer reports huge Chinese pyramid in isolated mountains southwest of Sichuan. Like,
rolls off the tongue.
So you have the New York Times actually published a photo of the supposed pyramid about 2 days later, which at the time was attributed to Gaussman. So they had like a picture of this just like looking like it looks very much like a pyramid. Like you look at it and you're like, it was
pyramidal shape with like a flat top, but it didn't radiate the bright white as presented by Gaussman.
Yes. Yeah, or without a jewel on top.
Yeah, missing no capstone.
Yeah, it definitely kind of like looks like a pyramid.
Top.
Right. It definitely looks like a pyramid, but it's not as impressive
and overgrown. Like this is, right. It looks like it's old. It has forest growth. I mean, I guess if someone plucked the Jumanji jewel off the top, the forest would immediately grow back as there is no more power in the area. But it looks as if this has been left alone for a long time, that the forest has come back and
reclaimed it.
Yes, exactly. Reclaimed it. That's what I was looking for.
Or it's intentionally camouflaged.
Well, I mean, I like that. But I mean, all like the Mesoamerican pyramids, like the Mayans and the Aztecs, all those were pretty much overgrown when they found them as well.
Yes, but they were also built in the middle of the Central and South American jungles.
Right in the jungle.
These were built in like mostly like plain areas, maybe like forested, but not much. So now this one that they actually, like the photo that he took and in the area that it was placed in, it was actually later identified as the well-known Maoling burial mound, which is actually the tomb of Emperor Wu of Han, who from 156 to 187 BC. And this is actually located in Jinping in the Shaanxi province, which is about 25 miles to the northwest of the provincial capital of the area, Xi'an. It's an actual structure there, this mausoleum, and its structure and its form is what's labeled as a trapezoidal tumulus built from rammed earth with a rectangular base, which measures 222 by 217 meters, so 728 by 712 feet, with a height of 47 meters, so about 154 feet.
So that would probably, I mean, it's far from the Great Pyramid, which is what, 40 stories or something, right?
Yeah, but the base, how big's the base compared to the Great Pyramids?
So it is larger. It is, I think that not that one, the Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the one we talked about before, the base is bigger. I don't think that one's as
the actual
big. So
the footprint is bigger, but the height is less.
Right. So compared to the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, like Qin Shi Huang's height is 76 meters, 249 feet. You've got the Pyramid Giza standing at 146.7 meters and 481 feet. And then you have the actual Sun Pyramid of Teotihuacan at 65.5 meters, so 214 feet. So it doesn't really like measure up. When they originally reported this, I think it was either Gaussman or I think Gaussman made like a off the top of his head. Yeah. Like when he looked at it, he made an estimate of being like 1,000 feet or something, like something. He gave some ridiculous number.
The thing with this doesn't add up. Now here, like the Gaussman description doesn't add up to like what you see in this picture. It doesn't. Like you're like, nope, this doesn't add up. But if you like, this is one of the things I was looking at when I was looking at this picture, and that I thought about is what if that's the base to whatever, or a landing structure to whatever Gaussman saw. Like there was another pyramid structure that sat perfectly on the plateau of that, and that was sitting there with a jeweled top when he flew over.
So he's just looking down and sees the white crystal-y looking thing. He doesn't really notice the base or the craft.
Well, yeah, whatever it is, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like whatever was there before is now not there. And what we're seeing left is this pyramid base with the large flat top plateau. Similar to, I was thinking in my head, what were those, the
things at Chicken Pizza?
Or the India has a lot of them. I can't remember the name. of the flying structures.
Oh, Viemanas.
Yeah, Viemanas. That's kind of where my brain went to, is like maybe this was some sort of structure that Gossman did see, and
maybe these are the steel dragons they're talking about.
Yeah, and then whatever it is gone, or if it, I'm not going to say it just flew away, but maybe it teleports or is cross-dimensional or something like that, and this is just
time traveling.
Yeah,
or maybe
perhaps.
Well, maybe this is 45, right? So probably air travel over the region. That's like probably a fairly new thing. So a lot of times when you get into the Chinese pyramids, like China's trying to cover them up. They're trying to cover up some history they don't want the world to know about. So maybe they thought that it had been found out upon and they dismantled like the part of the top or something. That's like some of the theories you talk about. Like maybe they are. A lot of people say like, oh, they're trying to hide a part of their history because it would maybe crumble the one China theory or something.
So I think that is a very modern thing though, because when we were the time that the pyramid was sighted, that you guys are saying, like, we were allies with China. Yeah. We were helping them fight the Japanese who were occupying their country and doing really bad things.
Yeah, we were exploiting.
I think they'd want to tell us about
manufacturing,
that kind of stuff.
And
about the pyramid.
Labor.
Yeah, I think they would probably tell us about that if we were helping them. Probably something we'd want to know about. Now, these days, perhaps not. So, like we talked today. So,
hold on. I don't know about that, because what are you going to be like? All right, thank you so much for help, but by the way, we got a fucking pyramid.
And there's
I don't know if you want to know this, but we got a pyramid.
We got this pyramid, and guess what? We can move it through time.
But we're not going to use it to defend our people who are being massacred by the Japanese forces.
Well, but they didn't know how to use it.
But here's the thing: like, say if
they made it disappear.
Well, but maybe they don't know how. If it's something where it just moves through time, it's not like it's going to be able to help them really. If you're like, okay, good, like we moved it, like, well, now where is it? We're like, we don't know.
Or maybe
hopefully it pops up in 50 years. We don't know.
Maybe those who knew how to use it or knew what it was fucking fled, took off. They're like, look, we're getting our asses kicked by the Japanese right now. We got a GTFO.
Also used by the elites at the time to escape.
Yeah.
Perhaps. But let's talk about because we said Dan mentioned the rammed earth construction.
Mm-hmm.
So I've only seen this used one time in my construction experience, and it was not for anything structural, but I know it actually can work very well. You pretty much form something the same way you would before you pour concrete, but instead of concrete, you just dump a mixture of like gravel, sand, clay, and then some type of like bonding agent. I think they actually use like some type of plant material or something. And then you just, 1 foot at a time, and then you just pack it down so solid till it's completely packed, and you just keep doing it. And then you remove the forms and you have yourself a concrete wall, but it's
fucking mud pyramid.
But it's pretty it's a pretty robust construction if you do it right, and the water can't get into it. So I've only seen it used for like a landscape wall, which actually looked really cool. But
yeah, a number of the tombs were built in that fashion. So you had they would lay out, like, you build it layer upon layer, hundreds of layers on top of each other of just packed down earth, taking people, hundreds of people.
A shitty
months.
Job.
Absolutely.
Just packing dirt all day long.
Now, I know in modern times now we're probably using compactors and stuff to get a really good thing. But you're telling me that like back then it would just be foot power of someone just stomping.
Hand
slowly.
packer. They have like, it was like a.
I mean, they it's like they showed in a couple documentaries. They have actual this is.
They still use those. They still use those for landscaping a lot. It's like a heavy weighted bottom.
These weren't built in the Stone Age. Like, these were built during like Imperial China. Like, they weren't. They knew how to build things.
Yeah, they were building it to hold a lot of weight. They
got their own Chinese gin. They just walk around packing that shit down. They got Chinese giants, right?
Oh, the giants, yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be easier. A couple giants.
So you have these ones. So now, if you compare to what these areas look like today, there's a big difference, and you'll notice it. Like we just mentioned, and we'll talk about it now. But so, in the original photo, you'll see this very bare pyramid. Like, the surface is very barren. There's nothing on top of it. It looks like it's just straight up dirt or grass or something like that, just dried up grass. But now they have a bunch of forested overgrowth onto some of these areas. Like you can see there's a lot of trees which are planted in these, I guess you could call them suspicious looking rows of looking over these things. So there is some, they're like aspen trees too, which is like a really, really cypress or something. Yeah. Some really, really fast growing tree. It's like they're planted, looks like to be in rows in order to grow and pretty much cover the mounds. So there's some rumor that is that perhaps these trees were planted in order to cover these up from the air, and they don't want people looking at them because you can see them on Google Maps. Like you can pick them out on Google Maps.
The trees do nothing.
But yeah,
technology.
So why would they put these trees here? Possibly, why even plant trees on top of these?
Well, see,
trying to remove their carbon footprint.
I offset the pollution. What I was kind of thinking is like in my head, I was like, okay, well, I had two trains of thought. One of them is if this is burial mounds, you don't want like looters or grave robbers going into these areas and stuff. So it's like you're trying to make them hard to be found, but the secret's already out. Like people know. So it's like, I don't really understand, especially if it's if it's this packed material, like it's going to take, it's not like you can just like grab a shovel and you're just like, all right, I'm going to get in there. Like this would be a project to unearth.
Well,
so it doesn't really, it seems very odd to me to take the steps to plant these trees to hide this, other than the fact of you're just trying to take as much attention away from it as possible.
That's what I thought. Because like the way the history reads on these is they were pretty much like a palace for the afterlife, right? They would build like, excuse me. Omicron. COVID. They would build these underground afterlife mansions pretty much. So the spirit could like wander and live under this mound for eternity. That's kind of what like it read like, right, Dan?
Some of them, yes. Like some of them were built this way. Actually, so I mean, to get into it, like actually some of the burial mounds, which we see in pictures and a lot of like, pick and choose which photos they use. Some of them are not the ones that exactly we're thinking about. Like they're like the Han Dynasty ones were actually built as a form of defense against the Huns. Like the Han emperors. If you read up on like the Han Dynasty, like that, you can kind of get a feel for a lot of them. Like they're very revered dynasty in China, and because they did make a lot of like improvements to like the social and kind of contributions to like cultural China and things like that. I think they like standardized writing and a whole bunch of like systems of government and law, all this kind of neat stuff. But they took like social service and like defense of the empire very seriously. So even when they died, like emperors made it kind of a tradition to be buried in these mounds, which essentially they built towns around, and then the towns would actually use them as defensive structures for when the Huns would invade it, because the Huns invaded like every year. It was like the seasons, like rains,
like defensive structures, like they would go into them or they climb to the top of them, or
climb to the top of them, use them as like a tower or something, like elevated things, because you can see where there's like a line of Han. I think it's in Xi'an, but there's like a line of like Han tombs, which mausoleums are all built in that thing. And then around these towns, you'd have like hundreds of thousands of people living in these towns. Like these tomb towns is kind of what they call them. Like, and you would have they would maintain the tombs as well as have the obligation to defend. Like it would be there to defend from the Huns and other invading forces. And
it was pretty genius too, because it was all strategic by the emperor at the time, right? Because he would choose, like the people he would send to create these tomb towns were people he saw as potential rivals. So be like, here, this is your job. You're going to go fuck off and build this town.
And you can't say no.
Yeah. And so they'd have to go, and he'd have like, there goes his competition. There goes his potential rivals, people he was worried about. Like, it's fucking genius, man. But like, it's cool too, because you're saying like with the advances made with the Han Dynasty. Like, have you heard of oh Jesus, what's her name? Like Lady Qinzui, I think her name is. I'm pretty sure. So she's basically like the best preserved mummy that we have in history.
Right.
So she died in like 163 BC, which is what was like the end of the Han Dynasty, basically.
Yeah, like near tail end, I believe. Yeah.
But they found her body in 1971, and basically, like, it was so packed well, like, and preserved that her hair was still intact, her skin was still soft to touch,
still juicy.
and her veins still housed type A blood.
Yeah,
What?
it was. Yeah,
Like,
it was. We talked a little bit about it on the Emperor, the Qin Wang episode. But yeah, like the way the burial practices of the time were very much like based around like. They kind of knew what they were doing, but there was always kind of different things. So there's a couple ways they would preserve. They try to preserve the bodies of these nobles and royalty, to last them into the eternal afterlife. So one of them was like, I know they would make like entire suits made of jade, like little jade plates, because they figured like they thought that they had special preservation properties. So you'll see a lot of those. And then, but the way that they buried the noble lady was like, yeah, they wrapped her in 20 layers of silk, and then they packed her inside one box, and then there was like four nesting boxes, and then they sealed them all with lacquer, and then they covered it in like they put it down into the ground, and then inside the pit they filled it with charcoal and then like a type of clay. Wow. And then so it was like completely sealed from air and water. And when they pulled her out of there, like, I mean, you can see videos and documentaries about it. Like, she's like, still juicy. Like, she's still like
her limbs and touching her skin. You can see like, the sponginess of her skin. Like, you can see the indents from
this
their fingers.
This gives me weird vibes of like what we do now, like, rumors of like cryogenically freezing like Walt Disney and shit, of like maybe we can bring them back when things are better. So it makes me think of like maybe she wasn't completely dead when they put her in these things.
They preserved her alive.
Actually, there were some emperors that there are stories and records that not 100%. Well, there's evidence to support that some emperors would have their either servants or concubines sealed in there alive, or they they'd have them not killed, but they'd be like, here, drink this poison, and then we're going to bury you with the emperor.
All I'm saying on that point is that, to me, thinking about the preservation process, rather than having someone die and then being like, okay, shit, well, we got to move now and get all this stuff done. It's like you're going downhill quickly. You know what I mean? Like, after you die. So it's like if you're put there before you're dead, it kind of makes more sense to me that you kind of get it arranged, you put them in there, you seal it, you close it. It's like, we're going to bring you back when we can.
Yeah, but they still died in 163 BC, man.
I mean, they were still dead.
Fucking that long time.
Pretty sure I'm pretty sure they were dead before they put them in there, because they were like, I don't think
You'll be okay. Don't worry.
Unless it's Imhotep. They mummified that bastard alive. I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen it in the Mummy, dude.
But think about this. Hear me out here. Now, if maybe that's one of the reasons why they're trying to go through like of planting and hiding and don't want these structures, because they don't really want people to take an interest in digging out some of these burial mounds, because they know they have emperors and whatnot so well preserved through some ancient ways that we don't know, that they're hoping to be reanimated at some point when technology catches that far. Like, right? Maybe that's a thing. And that's why they're like, hey, no, don't worry about it. But like, maybe there's ancient scriptures there that says like, that's the plan, is that these people will be brought back when we're able to, or when the sky dragons come back and we can raise them from the dead.
Listen, everything I've seen in Thundercats tells you it's a bad idea. You do not want to bring Mum-Ra back. It's going to be a fucking problem.
So circling back to the tree issue, when I looked at the trees, my first thought was that when I looked at the original pictures, and then I saw the pictures of the trees, I looked up actually like about kind of, so if we talked about a little bit in Chichen Itza, where I think we talked about, or Teotihuacan actually, we might have talked about it, but it's like, so the structures that you see today were actually like, that's the stone foundations really. And those tops where there's nothing, that is gone or whatever, actually would have been covered with like wooden structures, would have been covered with these colorful colonnades like made of wood, or, stuff that probably doesn't, age so well, deteriorate, be gone, whatever. these tombs actually had they had a layer of earth on top of them at some point. And I was reading a couple articles about how, as time goes on, you had these villagers and stuff that lived around in the area. And as soon as they kind of these emperors and their royalty fell out of favor, they would go up there and they would just scrape off the top layer and use it for bricks. They would use it. It's just in Rome, when Rome fell, a lot of the cities fell into disrepair and things like this. People were taking pyramids as well. You take pieces off, you take all the marble, you take everything that's easily take off to use to build something else.
Yeah.
So there was that.
Stealing copper wire and stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. For fucking crack
just
money.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just, ancient Roman crackheads stealing marble off of temples and stuff. So with all of that gone, the big problem that you have with a lot of these, there's what is one of the natural processes that is kind of really difficult to prevent, especially what's structures that are kind of angled down.
Weathering.
So landslide, which is a type of kind of
avalanche.
Erosion. So you have erosion is one of those natural processes that you have to worry about, especially when preserving these types of sites. And so what's one of the best sustainable natural ways to kind of stave off erosion?
Cover it in dirt and plant on it?
Yeah, you put trees. Trees with roots.
You would have to you would have to put a huge amount of dirt over top of it, or else the tree's roots would break through the packed earth.
And here's
foundation.
the issue I have with the trees. These things were sitting for how long without the need for trees?
Well, maybe
right?
that's a new thing. Maybe to preserve.
It's a newer thing. They planted those trees. I read about it. Right? They planted those trees as it was a preservation effort. When they figured out that these things need to be preserved at some point, because you had people scraping the stuff off the top of these, but they figured for some of these,
did they go backfill it first, where they're going to plant, add an extra big layer of dirt and then plant trees?
They had some because you can see some of those places they've been covered over with dirt. They look a little bit more.
Is that really the best way to preserve it though? Because you're preserving it because you want to keep it and it's magnificent and it's interesting, but you're also covering it up and making it look nothing like what it was.
Well, you're not worried about what's on the top. It's more what's inside.
It's what's trapped within.
The best way to preserve it would be to drop a huge glass dome over it.
Sure, but that's definitely not the most logistically sound way to do it.
To me, I'm it seems strange that for all these thousands of years now, it's been sitting there just fine. And now they're we got to plant all these trees. We got to plant trees right now. Fast growing trees. We have to right now. It seems a little suspect to me that there was no issues before that. Now that people are starting to get attention, now it's hey, but plant all these trees on them.
Well, maybe
plant all these trees.
Maybe because they haven't let in very many outside scientists. Maybe they've done their own scans of it and realized there's something in there that they didn't think was there, and they're oh, okay, seal it up, close it off.
That's scary.
So that is one of the issues that people take up with this, is that the Chinese government and academia are very hesitant to open some of these tombs. Some have been excavated. Some have, I think, a lot of the more important ones, a lot of the emperors' tombs, especially, Qin Shi Huang is one of the best examples, because they haven't totally excavated that on the suspicion that there might be this giant, it's described, and so some people have taken the description of there's a giant city of flowing mercury with rivers of flowing mercury under it, and they've detected dangerous levels of mercury underneath there that they don't want to, it would be a task.
Similar to Teotihuacan, they said to give the illusion of space and stuff, they would use perhaps maybe mercury, that's a river under, in their eternal underground palace, rivers of mercury.
Yeah, and it looks fucking rad. It would look so rad. Super awesome. Yeah. But it would also be super deadly.
It's weird that you have two civilizations spread so far apart that would be. It's weird to have those connections with both having.
Is it weird for people to look at flowing metal and think that's not cool?
So fucking
I mean, to me, like, that would be, that's cool to me. I think,
but not only that too, we're talking pyramids, we're talking mummification. Like we're talking, they both worship the human animal hybrids. Like there's tons of shit that are,
even the building style.
Yeah. Like there's so much in common with
like the Chinese, like these pyramids, even though they're not made with stones, like
it's still step style, right?
But it's very Mesoamerican looking with like the steps and then the big flat top
and Egyptian.
Yeah, Egyptian too. Yeah,
Egyptians use step pyramids too.
So yeah, it is. I mean, I agree, Brad. I think it is like over different eras of humanity. People, it's like we're meant to build this way. If we don't share knowledge, it's like we're meant. Like this is, every time we're like, yeah, step pyramid. That's the way to go.
Is there another better way to stack dirt and rocks that will last for a really long time?
In a rectangle would be easier, but probably it wouldn't last as long. I agree. A triangle is probably built right. A triangle is a pretty stable structure.
So there's also the idea that mountains in Chinese culture, ancient Chinese culture, were considered sacred. Like these areas it's a very mountainous area, China. Like, I mean, you go to some of these places and the scenery is fantastic. Like it's something straight out of a fantasy book. Like it's amazing. But a lot of these things, a lot of their tombs were built to resemble mountains because those are where they believed, like just like Greeks and stuff and other places, like on top of high places, this is where the gods lived, or where you could communicate with the closest you could be to heaven,
closer to the sky.
And so so there's also this idea that if you look at some of the tombs, like they're very placed and very specific. They're spaced and they're oriented in very specific ways. And so one of those ways is how they have the what's interesting is a lot of the tombs are aligned to north, like the cardinal directions. Like they're aligned very, very
to like the North Star. Like
like they're very accurately placed so that they align to the cardinal directions, north and south, east and west. And like how they put those down is absolutely mind-boggling that they're so accurate on some of these. And then they do have some under investigation. You have some things that don't line up so well.
Well, until you change where they point, then sometimes it might seem like they were maybe planning ahead for something else. But we're going to grab a quick beer. We'll be right back.
So now you have all of these mausoleums, which are aligned in a very precise manner in the cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west. So you have a scientist by the name of, I'm going to butcher this, it's like Giulio Magli, is an Italian archaeoastronomer.
Giulio.
It could be Giulio. I'm probably butchering
Let's
that.
go with Giulio.
So Giulio used satellite images in order to analyze the spatial and cognitive relationships between the mausoleums of the emperors and the royal family members of the Western Han Chinese dynasty. And what he discovered is something really interesting, is that about half of these monuments were aligned precisely to true north. But also there were a select few others that had a slightly different pattern of orientation and were off by nearly 14 degrees. So the question is, why do you have so many? You have more, half of these things are aligned precisely true north. Boom, nailed it. Now, and then the other ones are kind of like slightly off. Like, did they just?
Well, 12 degrees is pretty far off, actually. You would think compared.
Yeah.
So we're talking true north to like whatever 2,500 years ago, right?
Magnetic north, because around this time, like during the Han Dynasty, they had invented the lodestone compass. Like the compass was a known technology and it was used. So to magnetic north, that's where it was. These ones were aligned to.
Oh, not to astro.
Well, they might have been. Some of them are actually. I think they're aligned to whichever kind of star was in that area. Since our records, like when we point to, at the time some of these were built, this might have been a different star.
See, and my my brain jumps to that perhaps that these ones that are all like precisely, they had some assistance from some outside force, guiding them of exactly how to build them, and then and giving them, just how to build these giant structures so precise. And then when we've lost contact with whatever helped them, the rest were just them trying to wing it from memory kind of thing. They're like, looking at the horizon, like, I think it was that way.
Just got to take away from human accomplishments, pal?
Yeah.
Just gotta.
Well, it seems like some are aligned to like, to astronomy, like to a North Star. And it almost seems like then some are aligned, to a magnetic north, because magnetic north we know drifts like quite a bit, right? It varies. It drifts quite a bit per year. So over 1,000 years, like that would make up for like a 12-degree difference,
right?
If you chose a star that like, and your compass aligned with that star, and you started building to that, but then another dynasty built, hundreds of years later or whatever to their compass. Now that's a whole completely different star. So that'd be 12 degrees.
Right. Well, so I think, a lot of people don't realize that, Polaris, like our North Star, is not exactly the only North Star that we have. So like, for example, like in 3000 BC, you would have had a star, that aligned with our north called Thuban in the constellation Draco. Like that would have been the North Star. And then Polaris didn't actually become the North Star till about 500 AD.
And it is till like another 100 years, and then it starts to drift out again.
Right. So there's like in a couple, like, I don't know, it's going to be a long span of time. Like the next one, I think it was like, I heard mentioned like Vega. I think Vega is going to be our next like North Star or something like that.
He'll be right in the middle of North Stars for a while. You're going to have to make a guess.
You're going to have to pick one, and you're going to be off either way.
That way.
It's hit or miss.
I think they said until 2102 is when Polaris will be aligned directly to north, like until that time. Right. And then it'll start kind of drifting off. But so we have this instead, like, so you have these ones that are aligned, which may have been aligned to like a certain star or a certain direction. Now, some of these that when Giolio went through the data and like looked at these, he figured out that it appears that the set of slightly off monuments had been aligned to a star where the pole would have approached in the future. In Polaris, aka the North Star. So they had actually predicted like where the star was going to be, and that's where they built the ones that are slightly off.
And on that exact date, when you open the door to the pyramid, all the energies of the ley lines of the worlds combine. All the pyramids connect together in one giant electrical grid.
So yeah,
I don't know what happens after that, but
so Chinese culture back then, ancient Chinese culture was familiar with the concept of, and I think most people are now since it's kind of been popularized, but feng shui or geomancy, some people call it. And so
that's where you like put your couch and like some plants and
some good feng shui.
So it looks nice in your room.
Right. So, and there's still aspects of feng shui which are used today in modern construction of buildings in China and other Asian countries. And so you have, which I found out that there's actually two forms. There are actually two forms of feng shui. There's not just the one. Apparently there's one called form feng shui, and then there's like a form school, and then there's another one called compass school. And form school, the original one, that one would be, they used to align structures, and they would cast them in auspicious locations according to the formation, like the land formations within that. So I think some of like the auspicious things that they would use. So you'd want the best places to build like a tomb or something, or a city or something. You want to put it with a mountain to the north, and then you would have, and then also like a large river on the south side. Like that was like one of the best places that you could put one of these, like a building that you consider, to have a consecrated building. And then, but the thing is that form school preceded the compass school, because once the lodestone compass was invented, and they realized like that's the actual north, like that overtook it. And then they kind of put out the form school, and then compass school took over, and then aligning, since aligning things to the cardinal points became a lot more easier, according to that. So then that became the way, that overtook the dominant methods of construction at the time.
Yeah.
It's cool.
It's fascinating to me that they would have the foresight to like plan ahead and be like, well, we know this is going to drift, and so we want to be able to, point to Polaris in the future because we know that they had that knowledge, even back then. It to me, it's just fascinating. It's mind-boggling that they would have that kind of understanding.
Yeah, I mean, the Han Dynasty and a lot of the other ones, like they had extremely developed astronomy charts, like star catalogs, like they, map out in the entire night sky and like the movements of like track the movements of stars. That's one of the things that a lot of archaeologists remark and I find remarkable about like Chinese records and things is like they were very good at keeping records. Like they were preserved their things. Like a lot of them, you'll see those types of like the scrolls that are made of like individual like bamboo sticks, like little bamboo like planks, and they kind of mark out all that stuff. But they had tons of like writings on the astronomy, alchemy, science, like all of that kind of geography and all that kind of neat stuff. So there's a lot of cool records a lot of cool stuff that, again, it's like they were a lot smarter. People were a lot sharper back then than we kind of, we assume sometimes.
Yeah, we always like think of humanity as just like a straight line progression. Like, oh, we're this smart now, so back then there's no way they could be. But in many things, they're better. They're better at things. Like you take away all our modern technology, like we're nothing. Like, and these guys were doing all this stuff just by like doing the long hand, the long form way, watching night in, night out, marking it down for hundreds or thousands of years, and then like passing that on. Now, if
never been lazier as a people.
No, now if I don't have my star chart app and I go looking at the sky, I don't know what anything is. Like, what's up there? Like,
I mean, back then it's like it's your job, Like these. I mean, you would have entire like organizations just dedicated to these things. So you're watching the night sky. I mean, we don't have they didn't have TV back then. They didn't have any of the kind of distractions that we would, the things that we would consider distractions today.
It doesn't take a lot for me to be distracted to not do this kind of work, honestly.
But to them, these kinds of calculations and these kinds of records, like this stuff was like your entire, for emperors and temples and the religion, like your legacy depended on this. Your country's entire, success landed on some of this stuff. So, I mean, them keeping records, like keeping good records would be just kind of I think it would be a matter of course of these kinds of things.
And it's interesting because I always think that, perhaps, we talk about, ancient civilizations that may have been wiped out in cataclysmic events and stuff like that. And Zell, you brought up like, if something were to happen now, like what would we do? And there would be an instant like change if if there was a cataclysmic event now, there'd be an instant like push towards like, we need to long form this stuff on a way that we're not going to lose it. And that needs to be our focus because we will lose this technology. Like this technology can fall to the wayside. We need to have this stuff written down, etched out, passed on. And to me, like when I start to look at these ancient civilizations that do just that, it kind of makes me think to like, Hancock's theories and Freddie Silva's theories about like an ancient civilization that passed this knowledge on. And they're like, you need to do these things. You need to write it down. You need to take records because it can all go away so fast.
I mean, we have like we're a very digital society, but we do have like paper records. It's just like if our energy grid went down, because everything we do as far as society is based on energy creation, like, just food, treating water, sewage, all the stuff that like makes us be able to live in mass society, gone. And then if that goes and like society starts crumbling and then the electrical engineers dwindle and there's not enough of them to keep grids going. And then fucking Braden picks up a book, Electrical Engineering 101, How to Build a Turbine. He's like, nope, doesn't matter. Dead. We're all dead.
I can't read.
Yeah. So it's really cool. It's cool to think about like how smart people were thousands of years ago when we give like, they're building mud huts, but they're also tracking the entire heavenly bodies for thousands of years and then judging the future of where they're going to be and building buildings to that.
I mean, I'm not even building a mud hut though. That's fucking Talking.
Right. And there's just looking at the stars, making those predictions based on the knowledge they have. They're like, okay, well, this is what is likely to happen. Like we were running out long form simulations through just thousands of years of stuff we can do now on computers very quickly. It's weird to see that like that was what we did day in, day out was just like, all right, it moved the point just a little bit. There it goes.
Oh, it's back again. Yep, mark it down.
So the going back to you guys talking about how we number one, humanity, like the way we develop knowledge is not exactly a straight line, like how things develop and then things. Also, like how we share knowledge, like how it has crossed, some ideas and concepts, either time to cross. There's a theory that perhaps that contact between East and West maybe happened like a lot sooner than we think it did. I mean, we're finding out just now that, how long Vikings were actually in the North Americas, or, there's a couple of academics and scholars that are kind of pushing for, the Chinese arrived in some of the
Newfies.
arrived, Chinese arrived in the Americas before then, or around the same time, or sooner than we previously thought. There is an interesting case with a group of mummies, because we're talking about pyramids, so you might as well talk about mummies too. So there are actually a set of Chinese mummies that were discovered mostly in the 1990s and had been...
Brendan Fraser helped dig them up.
Right. And so, which were actually outstandingly preserved and intact, despite being dated to about 4,000 years old. And they had actually been naturally preserved very well by the desert air in the area of Xinjiang in the Tarim Basin area of China. Now, when they analyzed the DNA of these mummies, and they actually sequenced these genomes of these very well preserved mummies, they found out that their analysis suggested that remains did not actually belong to newcomers, because the features on these mummies were very different from what you would consider being a native China, like the Chinese and their facial features and their hair colors were different, right? They had I think it was like some of these mummies had like red hair, which is very rare in those areas of China. It's like something you wouldn't see. And their features, like some people remarked that they looked remarkably, similar to more like a European or Caucasian human. I guess. And so you had the when they sequenced their DNA, they thought that perhaps these people had maybe come over here. Like there's also a rumor of like a lost Roman legion or something like this, but that's 4,000 years ago. It's a long time. You had this idea that perhaps these people had kind of migrated over here, perhaps. But what they actually found out was that this local group of residents there were actually descended from an ancient Ice Age Asian population, like that had been native to the area. Now, these mummies showed no signs of like admixture with other groups, like complete, like they hadn't mixed with any other groups in that area, and
Racist.
they were direct descendants of a group that apparently had been quite widespread during the Ice Age, but mostly disappeared at the end of that area.
Nordic aliens.
10,000 years
Aliens.
ago.
Nordic aliens. Makes sense. I get it.
When you see the redheads and stuff, I mean, we do get descriptions of Nordics like that, but it's mostly blondes. See, I was thinking before too, is that like, before you said that the genetics showed they're the local, I was like, you think these people with that kind of rare like hair color and stuff would be revered and sought after. I just think about like when I've gone traveling with Zell anywhere, and it's like if we run into any like, Chinese tourists or Indian tourists, they're like all wanted pictures with Zell. I was having to take pictures with Zell and all these families all the time because of his blonde hair. Like they just thought he was this like
blonde hair and a blonde beard.
And then
They're like, look, it's the Aryan race right here. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Look at this dummy. Look at this idiot. Let's take a picture with him.
And then I take a picture.
It's an albino.
He's so rare. He's so white. Oh my God.
And then they look at their camera and it's just a picture of them,
nothing.
right?
Yeah.
After you guys walked away.
Yeah, they're like, what happened? What magic is
Little
this?
did they know.
But it does seem like we've heard some descriptions of like redheaded, like
Giants.
hybrids, right? Of like aliens. But it's interesting that they wouldn't kind of venture out or like interbreed with any of the other, people in the area. To me, that was kind of weird. I'm like, it seems strange that they would just, unless they were like another race, perhaps of like an alien being where they're like, no, we're not messing with humans.
That's not that strange from back then, though. There wasn't a lot of intermixing like that.
There was no like Disney tale of like Romeo and Juliet, the two
star-crossed lovers.
Yeah.
One from the red-haired half alien race, one from the local population who fell in love. Families
None of
fought.
that.
They both took poison berries and down they went. I don't know. Now, we haven't found that story yet, but
Write it.
write that movie right there. Copyright ATT 2022.
Where art thou, red-hated alien?
And there's a couple other interesting little pieces of it as well, because they're saying that the kind of ethnic group that they were descended from are usually referred to as the ancient North Eurasians, and they're a hunter-gatherer population that survive only fractionally in the genomes of present-day populations, which include the indigenous people of Siberia and the Americas, which had the highest known proportions of
Interesting.
that's
crazy.
Those pieces
That's super
of genome.
fucking interesting.
And then another strange thing they found was that in the bear, like it's unclear. It's still unclear as to why that these mummies were actually buried with boats that were covered in cattle hides and oars near their head, which was it's a rare practice. Like where they lived, they lived on a shore of an oasis at the time, which would have been there, but there's no reason for them to have these boats. And they said that it's not a normal practice for that area. Like it's not where they would do it. And the only other kind of places that you really see these kinds of things, they said it's really best
Vikings.
associated with Vikings.
Yeah.
That's so strange.
rad, man.
Cool.
So how did this seemingly misplaced like culture end up here, and why are they buried with boats that you wouldn't normally?
Those are ancient Chinese Vikings, man.
Because they came when the sea levels were higher during the Younger Dryas. They ended up stranded in this center plateau. They couldn't get out. When they died, they put their boats with them because they thought in the afterlife we can go home.
Yeah,
Sounds about right.
I mean,
That's about right.
You pretty much
And
summed
then
that.
the remaining ancestors wandered the woods and they made their way to Siberia. They made their way over the land bridge into North America and down. And that's why you
Built some
see
Chinese pyramids.
Yeah, boom. Just one group of people. Cracked it, I think.
Now, is it they've only found these 4 or 13 mummies? Like it's we really haven't found more than that. Like it's just like because my head was like, is there more of this culture that was around this time, or could that like
the 13 is like from the articles I looked at, like it's not that many, but it is 13 is a lot of mummies. Like that's a lot to find.
I get it, but it's like I'm trying to think of like, okay, if they were mummified and buried, like how many more like were sustaining that portion of that, say, culture of this weird Viking culture in the middle of
a valid
nowhere.
question. You have to go back and look at what the I mean these mummies were discovered what they said the 1990s, so I assume like there's still study going on, and it's kind of in an out there area, so I'm not sure how many people get
Too
out
bad
there.
that one of them wasn't Persian, because then it could have been the 13th Warrior.
Oh yeah.
Dope ass movie.
So now we also have, and I think we've talked about this either on After Hours or we've talked about it on things, but we talked about the discovery of the Dragon Man.
What up?
Oh, he's owning it. He's owning it.
The ancient Braden's ancestor, Dragon Man, or also known as Homo longi, which being the Chinese word for dragon. So
that's what I want to be called from now on. Homo longi. Forget
so
dragon.
the Homo longi. The story actually goes back about the discovery of this really disproportionately large skull that they found, and it was all in the news like last year.
I take it back. Homo longi's too long. Just homo's fine. Just shorten it.
The discovery of this skull that had popped up. So almost 90 years ago, you had Japanese soldiers occupying areas of northern China, and they forced one Chinese man, forced a Chinese man to help build a bridge across the Songhua River in Harbin. Now, apparently, when his supervisors weren't looking, he found a remarkably complete human skull buried in the riverbank, and he actually took notice of it because of it was big, like it's large. It is not a normal size of human skull. And figuring this thing had some type of value, he managed to smuggle it out and hide it. And so it was kind of buried for
his sweater's just stuffed as he's walking out of the job site. It's just enormous, huge gut. He's just like, oh, nothing to see here.
Yeah, and so he buried it, or what was it, like in a well or something? Like he put it in a well, and then on his deathbed, he kind of told his family about where it was. And this was like a couple of years ago, and then they went and got it and pulled it out, and it was like a world shattering kind of find. Like it's one of those things that. They had like 3 papers written about it, and they. The Chinese paleontologists that were studying the skull, the team wanted to call it a new species, Homo longi, like it's its own thing, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalis. It's like they wanted it to be its own. They said that it is different enough to kind of classify it as its own species.
The proportions of the skull, it seemed like it had more like rectangle eye sockets, much bigger molars. It seemed like it seemed like a
big fucking teeth,
big old chompers, man. So they thought it's either its own species, like own offshoot of like a hominid, or perhaps the mythical Denisovan, which
Denisovans.
Denisovans?
That's how they say it. Yeah, because that's
Denisovans?
Denisovans, because it's Russian. Denisovan.
Okay. Well, whatever it is, Dan.
I've always heard Denisovans.
Whatever it is. Because they've only found before a molar and like a piece of a finger bone.
Mm-hmm.
But they know they must have been up in this area,
right.
Perhaps building megalithic structures in Russia. We've talked about some of those giant ones. They're like these, some people say they look natural, and some people say like, oh, these look like built by giants. Some people claim like maybe this offshoot of like a hominid is just like a bigger, stronger, more badass, even bigger and stronger than a Neanderthal.
Right, more hardy species than the Neanderthals, who are
just dumb as hell, though.
Well,
or maybe not.
We don't know.
How do you know? we don't even know Neanderthals are that dumb, because they actually had a bigger brain capacity. They had a bigger a bigger brain cavity than we do.
I think we're learning more about the Neanderthals were a lot more developed than we thought they were at this point.
It just seems like we were more adaptable, and therefore we were.
Just trying to flex on people trying to be smarter than them. That's all it is.
When they dated the skull, so pretty much the extent that they've got to studying this skull, as far as stuff that's been published, is that it seems that they've dated the skull from about 138,000 to 309,000 years old, somewhere in there. So giving it kind of and then they kind of used another series of dating called uranium series dating on the bone, and gave it a minimum age, so somewhere 146,000 years. So when they look at it, they say that it can't be Homo sapiens, just because it's got these large square eye sockets, like the thick brow ridge. It's got a big wide mouth and the huge molars.
Big fucking chomper.
So just looking at it, they're like, this can't be human. They haven't sequenced any of the DNA yet. They haven't. I think they're still trying to kind of figure out how to preserve it, how to do that without completely destroying what could perhaps be, if it is a Denisovan, and it's the first complete skull we've ever found of that species.
So why do they call it a dragon skull? Like the dragon man?
Well, because they call it Homo longi, because it's longi is long is the Chinese word for dragon.
Oh, okay.
It's fucking cool too, because I can't remember where I heard it, but the story, Fuxi, he was the first of the 3 sovereigns of ancient China. And he was said to have had like the lower body of a reptile.
Oh, so
Maybe that's the
he
same
was a
species.
man, or was he a dragon?
Dragon.
Or
Well,
maybe
we don't know.
Or maybe he
A
was
reptilian
just a dragon, or maybe he was a dragon man.
dragon man. Well, because he had the upper body of a man.
Or maybe he was.
Did
Well,
he
and to be-
burninate the countryside?
Maybe.
We only have a skull of this thing, right? So it's like,
Which is a lot. Like the Denisovans, we only have the like Zell said, we've only got like teeth, like a couple
fucking
teeth and a
bones.
finger
Yeah,
bone.
Yeah.
right? So what I'm saying is that like if ancient legends say like this thing had like reptile lower half, it's like
Maybe this is the upper half.
maybe this is the upper half, right?
This is twin brother that has the other half.
Yeah. Dragon legs, right? Who knows, right? It's an interesting thing to think about and wild that these 146,000 years ago you had this completely different like hominid
Fucking
walking around.
terrifying.
Right?
Imagine that dude.
Huge.
That dude would be fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
Just like palm your head. Just like
Yeah. Yeah. We would have been their little slave race. Like, don't hurt us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't hurt us.
I mean, we're finding out all kinds of interesting stuff like all the time, and it's like the more we find out, originally, like the idea was like humans had like a very straight evolution, like we went from one to the and now we find out that it's just like they always say like it's not like a tree, it's more like shrubbery. It's just like all the branches are all mixed together, everything's all going all weird, and that we were not like Homo sapiens weren't just by themselves for a really long time. Like there was a point in history where there were 5 or 6 to our knowledge right now, 5 or 6 different types of hominids. Like you got the Denisovans, Neanderthals,
had
Homo florensis, like
competition.
a couple other ones. Like you had a whole bunch of different
We
ones.
had
Just kind of everybody
it was a
running around.
worldwide battleground between hominids, is what it was.
I mean, it could be simpler than that too, though, because maybe this guy was part of an ancient advanced civilization, and let's say he was in a battle and he lost his arm, and he was also a scientist. So he lost his arm. He's also a scientist.
This is a simpler
Okay.
explanation.
No, this is great. This is great. I love it.
Yeah. Okay. So he loses his arm, but he's also a scientist, and so he hates the fact that he lost his arm, but he wants to incorporate it into his life's work. So he tries to alter his DNA. With an animal that is known to regrow limbs. So he chooses a reptile. And then there you go. You got your ancient Kirk Connors right there. The lizard. That's it.
That was a simpler explanation.
I was kind of
I agree.
Okay.
I was kind of thinking that maybe
Much
even
simpler.
if you think about that, these Homo longi and stuff, maybe they're like the tail end of the last ancient civilization that we didn't know, and maybe they were more intelligent than we know, and they just like it. This was just one of the last relics of their civilization that was destroyed, right? And they were scattered around, and we just don't find these things because there was a cataclysmic event that wiped most of them out at this time. So they just wandered whatever left as hunter-gatherers kind of things until they eventually just couldn't survive anymore. Like there wasn't enough of them. It'd be the same as us. They just didn't have the skill set to completely survive anymore without their civilization and their groups, and they just slowly withered away.
Well, yeah, we don't really know. Like, so maybe they were the dominant hominids on this planet, before the last glacial period. And then as that came over, that their territory was slowly glaciated. And maybe they didn't have as a robust, like humans, like we sweat and expel heat really well, but maybe the other hominids didn't, and they couldn't really move that much farther south.
They all panted.
They all fucking panted to death. No, but I'm saying like maybe they weren't as adaptable. Maybe
They're
they
just all beat red all the time.
once they get to about 45 degrees south, they just can't. They can't live that far. Like summers are too hot. Maybe they don't sweat the same. Like they couldn't. They were adapted for those northern climates.
I mean, you imagine like our strongest, like at least for Homo sapien, like our strongest hunting technique is just persistence hunting.
Marathon
you have
hunters,
to have to travel over long distance. Like we're just really good walkers and
runners, long distance runners.
If you can't do that to the best of your ability, you're overheating in these long distances that you're hunting your whatever the local prey is, then you wouldn't last long in those areas. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense.
Well, just think of I try to think of even looking at Gulbekki Tepe and stuff and how it's there's still a lot of mystery around that site and how it looked backfilled. Now, I'm not saying that there was Homo longi involved there, but I'm looking at that as the birthplace of agriculture. Obviously, agriculture was known practice predates what we currently think. And, if that was the case with Homo longi, well, maybe they did have some farming practices. And when that was gone, it's they weren't suited to hunt. They weren't suited for that adaptation to run and pursue and live in warmer environments. They're just can't do it.
Can't do it.
It's a gentle species. They just don't want to harm anything. Peaceful.
Or maybe we inhabited those warmer regions, and when they tried to move down, we just wiped them out.
Yeah, we're get out of here.
Yeah, these things are fucking weird looking.
Get out of here, big head.
Square eye.
Yeah.
We invited them in and, just
lift these big blocks.
Stuff happened.
Spread our disgusting disease.
We banged
and they
them
all died off.
Bang them out of existence, what you're saying. Because we do have what a lot of people have
there's still parts of our genome that they're that belongs to a hominid somewhere.
That'd be interesting to find out though, is
hominid X.
If now through this these big genome projects, if they found there is these two types of genes that must be from a prior hominid, kind of like a Neanderthal, but we don't really know. It'd be interesting to know if that's
there
been
is.
discovered.
I mean, there are. I think there's one or two sequences that they're we're pretty sure that these are from another. These are from a hominid. We got them from somewhere, some hominid, and we're just not sure yet. What
it's
it is.
It's insane to me that this is the only evidence of it. Like you said, a finger bone, and now the skull potentially. That's fucking wild. Of an entire species, that's all we have left.
Well,
potentially
146,000 years ago, this skull.
Still, we have older shit though, right?
Right? Yeah.
Not really.
I mean, you have these. Where they died were in caves and stuff. So there's other animals that would come in there, and they didn't. From what I know, we don't bury our dead most of the time. It could be.
We've talked about it so many times before. Fossilization is not an easy thing. It's got to happen under the perfect circumstances.
Even though we have a lot of stuff. Dinosaurs and so many dinosaurs and other weird creatures that lived on this planet.
Well, I don't know, man. I listened to this Christian lady that told me dinosaurs aren't even real, buddy.
They grab a rock.
She showed me a whole YouTube video about it.
They take a rock and they chisel out something that looks like a lizard, and they expect you to believe that that's a dinosaur. That's some bullshit. The Earth is 6,000 years old. There's no dinosaurs. Get over yourself.
Preach. Preach.
And part of the thing that I'm thinking too is that if you look up Homo longi and stuff, you can see that they have a rendering of what we think it may have looked like, and you're you can recognize it as a human looking hominid of some kind. You're okay, I recognize that. But my thing is
right there, the lizard. That's the lizard.
That's it. That's him. Connors right there.
We also took we can be bad. We can be bad at predicting these things from skeletal remains. We're just doing our best guess. Dinosaurs, we now know that most probably had feathers. And even though that, it's still, if you get most of our depictions are still reptilian dinosaurs. It's no, they probably had feathers. They probably had bright feathers.
We're all that fat kid at the beginning of Jurassic Park.
That's what I'm saying. But it just costs more on the budget for rendering. They don't want to have to do all that work. All the CGI rendering they'd have to do for all the feathers instead of just using lizard skin.
Well, but here's the thing, right? We're looking at the skull and we're going, this is kind of like our skull. We kind of recognize this. Maybe it looked like us. Maybe it didn't.
Maybe, yeah.
Right? Maybe it didn't at all.
Maybe it had huge cartilage buildups around its fucking cheeks and had a little
fell off.
And
cartilage, it's gone.
Cartilage wouldn't be there.
Wouldn't stay
gone.
I know, but you would have you'd be able to see where it attached to the bone.
I don't think so.
Not really for the nose.
The nose just disappears. It's a fucking hole.
I
in
know,
your face.
but you would know there's stuff attached there.
You wouldn't know.
I don't think you know.
No.
You would have no idea. If you saw a skull and you didn't have a nose yourself, you wouldn't go, I bet there was a protruding thing right here. That's
don't know.
probably what you would probably like. Our best guess, you'd be like, these things look like Voldemort. 100%.
These guys are definitely Skeletor and Masters of the Universe.
Nagini.
Definitely.
Nagini. That's what you would assume. But what I'm saying is like maybe
I've seen enough documentaries I've seen enough documentaries for them to like when they reconstruct like the faces of these things and they like take the certain points, like this is where the muscle was attached to the skull. Like they can tell those things.
For us.
And like in stuff that they already have example for, though, I'd imagine, right?
Yeah, but it's like that skull is very.
Yeah, but there's no indentations or anything. Like there's nothing indicating on the skull that there was anything attached there. Like that's just an.
Yeah, no, you show like they can show like where the muscle was attached to the like where it would be attached to the bones, like where it would be attached.
Muscle,
like
but
that,
maybe
there is evidence to show that.
there's cartilage buildup and like your face doesn't look. So we have a skull with square sockets. So maybe just like we think it might look like us, but it might just have like these fucking big.
Yeah, I mean, like he could have scaly. He could have feathers. We don't know.
Birdman,
right?
That's where we
could be. Could be Birdman. Could be
feathers aren't scary enough.
Homo
Get rid of the
parati.
feathers.
Full scales, full armored scales.
Yeah, scales.
Dragon Man.
Yeah,
Burning in the countryside.
That's it.
Birdman. Powered by the sun.
Bird person.
Yeah, but
Bird person.
one more thing about fossilization.
Attorney at law.
One more thing about fossilization of like ancient hominids. Good chance they built next to water, rivers, waterways like that. And we know like the sea levels of the world are 500 or 600 feet higher from probably the peak of their time, like 200,000 years ago or whatever. So civilizations that thrive, like Neanderthals and stuff, there's not very many fossils because they're just buried. Like if you added up all the world's excavation sites for fossils, for all animals, dinosaurs, everything, it's probably like, a fraction of a percent. Like there's so much stuff that's buried that we're just never going to find because there's no chance we can just go dig into every hillside, every plain, every valley. It's not going to happen. You find these stuff by chance most of the time, right? Like
you're lucky, yeah.
You find like a piece of pottery and then you start digging and then you might find something here or whatever. But very rarely are you going to find like just like, you know what? I think there is something here. I'm going to dig and oh shit, there's a whole bunch of.
That's like it wasn't thought that dinosaurs were in British Columbia area, and then in 2007, hikers in Tumbler Ridge were hiking a river and were like, hey, these kind of look like dinosaur tracks. Sure enough, they're dinosaur tracks. Now they found like a Tyrannosaurus Rex in Tumbler Ridge. They're like,
so fucking cool.
They're really cool.
Like, we didn't even know these things would be around this era. We had no idea. We thought
maybe they're still there.
Maybe they are.
Deep in the woods, just waiting.
Yeah.
Just by.
They got feathers.
They're just really small now. They just shrunk down. They're not the giant 30-foot carnivore. They're tiny.
Yeah. They're now chickens.
They are now chickens. And
they evolved into people.
Now I watched
it. We all know the Mario Brothers movie is a documentary. And that eventually everything evolves to look human. So
the queen is Bowser.
Queen is Bowser.
They both wear crowns.
Yep.
Checks out. Anyways, the Chinese pyramids, I mean, they're not megalithic in nature, so it doesn't get me super excited. But they're really cool. The construction of them.
It doesn't get you megalithiccally hard. That's what you meant to say.
You said it. But they're cool.
They're super rad.
Super rad.
They're very neat pieces of construction. Like a lot of stuff went into it. We do have a lot of information about them, and we did talk about how they. we might not in the near future be able to see some of these. I mean, they have very they brought up. I was watching one documentary and like they brought up a really good. And I actually saw like a actual kind of post about it because they were cracking open a couple. They're cracking open those mummies that they found. Like there was like a set of mummies they found in Egypt.
That's a bad idea.
And they were cracking them open. And, someone kind of asked on a forum post and they were kind of talking about like, why are we cracking these things open? Why can't we just would you go to the local cemetery and crack stuff open and be like, like just to take a look, and one archaeologist kind of remarked on that, where it's like in China, like they have a very different, their cultural value system is very different from our kind of Western values about, ancestor worship, like how they revere their ancestors and things. well, every kind of culture kind of has their own version of it. Theirs is very much like we're not going to do that. Like the royal families, the emperors, the first emperors of China, like they're very sacred, and we're not going to crack those open. They have opened other ones, like we said before. They've done like the princes and stuff, like other nobles.
Sure.
They have no problem cracking those ones open. But the emperors and stuff, we might not get to see those in our lifetime. We might not see what's inside
until they come back to life. Dan.
Until they come back to life and start breathing fire.
So they're
and stuff.
reanimated, and they're we're toast.
Yeah.
And start playing football with Yetis.
Han Dynasty, The Return.
2022.
Yeah.
You thought COVID was bad. Just wait.
I mean, Brendan Fraser is having a career revival, so I mean,
It's a cool topic. Let us know what you think. Follow us on socials. We always post some stuff related to the episode on Instagram, Facebook. So make sure you follow us there. Let us know your thoughts. If we missed something, tell us we're idiots. Point us in the right direction. It was fun. It's fun to look into. All right. Who do we got this week for a Theorite of the Week?
This week's Theorite of the Week is Dylan Sellers.
What'd this beauty do for us?
Oh man, so Braden kind of compared himself to Sauron, clubbing at little gray aliens.
very, very inaccurate representation.
How many
Absolutely.
gray aliens could Braden fight?
So
Put him in a
instead,
room.
Dylan put Braden's face on the dude from Doom.
Doom guy.
Doom guy. It's pretty badass. I really enjoyed it. There was a good runner-up with the Sauron. He did Sauron himself, but Dylan came in first.
Well, he did. He
Awesome.
did Braden's face, but then he also put some grays on all the
Yeah, it was
fucking little
pretty good.
aliens around.
But I mean, Doom, you don't have to because they're aliens, right?
They are technically aliens, but he put some alien gray faces on them. So
I mean, they're demons.
they're
demons.
technically
I don't
demons.
They're
yeah.
from the hell dimension.
Yeah,
I never played it. but-
demons are aliens, though. So it depends. Depends which lore you're going with here. But yeah, it was great. And then the runner-up, put him as Sauron. We would have gave that one, but it was second.
Daniel Barton Edwards, I believe.
It was second. Runner-up.
Yeah.
All right. And if you're not supporting the show, want to support your boys, your favorite podcast, you know where to go. alientheorist.com. You can find the links to the Patreon, the Supercast. Get all the bonus stuff early and ad-free. This week's newest supporters got Taylor Limbaugh. Or Limbach?
Limbaugh, I think.
Limbaugh. Isaac Saley. Jordan. Kenneth Perry. Matt Lanning. Johnny Reckless. I think that's supposed to be Scott Lindquist.
It's Scott
Scott
Lindquist.
Lindquist. James Reeder.
We got Eric Laschuk, Bowman, Kaylee Welch, Clayton, year pledged by Brandon, Craig Cozy. We got Braden Cantred and Briar Rideout.
I don't think you spelled
I think you said that right. It's actually Craig Can't Read.
Yeah.
Braden Cantred.
One more time.
Braden Cantred.
Close enough. All right. Thank you very
Good
much
name,
for
anyways.
supporting the show.
And as we always say, keep those eyes on the skies.
See you in after hours.